M- The on-air light went dim, and Dr. Cindy took off her headphones. "What's going on? I'm doing a show." "We know what you've been up to," Sabrina said, unconvinced by the woman's dumbfounded expression. "Well, we know all about it." "I have no idea what you're talking about," Cindy said. "The magic items," Daphne said. "Merlin's wand, the wonder clock, the water from the fountain of youth. We know you stole them." "Stole them? I've never stolen anything in my life," Cindy exclaimed. "Rhoda, I don't know what's going on, but this is incredibly rude, letting your grandchildren come in here and accuse me of being a criminal." "Cindy, I would agree if we didn't have proof. We know you sent your assistants to break into people's homes. They snuck in as mice and then transformed back into men once they found what they were looking for. But you don't know what you're doing," Uncle Jake added. "We know you're trying to combine the items to make some kind of magic, but it's not working, and you're causing chaos all over them. You had to stop before, well, I don't know what, but it could be really bad." Cindy was horrified. "I never sent my assistants anywhere to do any such thing." Then let's ask them ourselves. Where are they?" Mr. Kenneth said. "I know ways of making them admit their guilt." "They're on the roof," Dr. Cindy said. "During a broadcast, something went wrong with the transmitter, and they're trying to fix it. My husband Tom is up there supervising the repairs." "Let's go have a conversation with them then," Granny said. Cindy stormed past the group in a huff. She led them up a flight of steps and onto the roof. As she threw open the door, the group was blinded by a penetrating blue light. Sabrina had to shield her eyes just to see 2 feet in front of her, but soon her sight adjusted and what she saw was shocking. Cindy's husband, Tom Baxter, was standing at the base of the radio tower. He was holding an ornate wooden clock in his hand. Malcolm, the producer, stood nearby with what appeared to be a tiny vial of water. Alexander was blasting the vial with a magic wand, causing the rays of energy from the wand to pass through the fluid and onto Tom. Bradford monitored the storm above, shouting information to the others about its size and shape. From the looks of the power coming out of the wand, the energy should have obliterated Tom Baxter, but the magic bounced off the magnificent clock, circling Tom in snake-like blue light. Behind him was an even more shocking sight. There was an open black hole like the one Sabrina had seen in the skies during the other storms. She knew it was a tear in the fabric of time itself. "Tom!" Cindy shouted. "What's going on here?" Tom's face changed from happiness to concern. "Go back downstairs, Cindy. This is very dangerous. It's not safe for you to be here." "What are you doing, Tom?" the radio host cried. Tom smiled. His yellow eyes lit up when he looked at his young wife. "I'm giving us a future," he said. "It's happening!" Malcolm shouted. Suddenly, there was an immense blast from the wand, and Tom's body was pushed back to the surface of the black hole. He hovered there as the powerful vacuum behind him began to pull things in. At first, there was just a few stray leaves, but Sabrina could feel the energy building. She studied Tom closely, wondering why he wasn't afraid, and then she began to see subtle changes in his appearance. His gray head started to sprout new brown hair. "You have to stop this!" Granny yelled. "Don't worry, we've got this under control," Bradford replied. "It'll all be over soon." Sabrina glanced at the storm swirling above. "Mr. Baxter, whatever you're doing has some nasty side effects. It's causing tears in time," she shouted over the noise. "Yes, I know," Tom yelled as the pronounced stoop in his posture corrected itself. "I hope there wasn't too much of an inconvenience. It took us a while to get the proper devices to build my machine." "What is this?" Cindy asked. "It's a time machine, and it's too dangerous," Granny said. Tom smiled. "Rhoda, I didn't build a time machine. I built a clock. a clock that allows me to roll back the years on myself." "Uh-oh," Daphne said as the magic detector started to shake violently. She pointed a black hole as it grew nearly 10 times in size. Worse, Sabrina saw something begin to descend from it. Slipping through the surface was a dragon. It huffed and then darted clear out of the blackness, flying into the air with a head-splitting roar. "This was the coolest thing I've ever seen," Puck said as he pulled his little wooden sword from his waist and released his wings. "I'm going to kill it." "You're going to get plenty of practice when you get older," Sabrina said as she pulled on his sleeve. Puck frowned at her. "What do you mean by that? I'm never after. I don't get older," he said, though his voice cracked on several of the words. He held his throat in shock. The dragon buzzed the building, leaving a trail of sulphurous fumes in its wake. Sabrina had to dive to get out of the way of its sharp claws and long tail. "Mr. Baxter, you have to stop this. You've already let something out that could kill us all," Uncle Jake shouted. "What's next?" Tom shook his head. "It won't be long now," he said as his yellow eyes grew bright and clear. The dark spots on his skin faded, and his stringy arms and legs grew lean and muscular. Cindy rushed to him and stood as close as the energy swirling around him would allow. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I love you, Doc. I have always loved you, and I always will. But I'm only a man, and you are an ever after. My body is withering away. I've grown too feeble to even take you on a picnic or dance to our wedding song. In no time at all, I will have been gone. You will never die, Cindy. Now, neither will I." Cindy cried out to him to stop, while her eyes were filled with wonder and possibility. "I love you." "You better, Cinderella, 'cause now you're stuck with me forever," Tom said as he stepped down from the black portal. The blue energy that had once enveloped him was gone, as were his wrinkles. He was no longer old. Now he was young, strong, and handsome. He didn't look a day over 25. He took Cindy in his arms and kissed her. "It's over, darling." But Tom Baxter was wrong. The dragon flying overhead let out an angry roar and a series of flaming assaults. The first one hit the transmitting tower, and it fell over like a child's toy. Its steel girders melted into liquid and poured all over the roof. Everyone scrambled to get out of the way, but the next blast from the dragon missed them and hit a parked car on the street below. "Uh-oh," Daphne said as the magic detector began to shimmer again. "What?" Sabrina asked. "Is something else coming through the hole?" Before Daphne could answer, Tom was violently yanked backward to the edge of the black tower. He squirmed to break free, but couldn't. Worse still, the hole began to grow at an alarming rate, along with its gravitational pull. The black tail was no longer satisfied with leaves or loose paper. It was pulling at everything. "Boys, what's going on?" Tom called to his assistants. Malcolm, Alexander, and Bradford stumbled back in fear. "We didn't do this," Alexander shouted. "Can you pull yourself free?" Cindy said as she rushed to her husband. He shook his head. She reached up and took his hand, desperately trying to pull him off the hole's edge, but she wasn't strong enough. She even lost a little gold bracelet as it sailed off her wrist and disappeared into the void. "I guess it's not going to let me go," Tom said, forcing a little laugh. "Honey, you might be married to a teenager pretty soon." Cindy turned to the family. "Do something," she begged. Uncle Jake was already fumbling through his pockets. He pulled out one trinket after another, examined them, and shoved them back into his jacket. "I don't think I've got anything that can stop this." "Any suggestions?" Sabrina asked her grandmother. Granny's handbag was already swinging through toward the hole. "Perhaps the three of you should go down to the street where it is safe." "Aw, I want to see what happens," Puck complained. The fallen tower began to roll toward the time hole. Kenneth grabbed Granny and the girls and leaped over it as it rushed toward them like a stampeding rhino. Luckily, Uncle Jack was not in its path, and Puck simply rose into the air to avoid it. A second later, the entire transmitter was sucked into the tower. Unfortunately, as Puck rose off the ground, he found himself trapped in a black hole's gravitational pull. He flapped his wings hard in an effort to escape, but there was nothing for him to grab onto. He drifted closer and closer to the emptiness with nothing to stop him. We've got a problem, he said. Sabrina grabbed his foot as he passed, but she too was pulled up. Help! She yelled. Daphne latched onto her as well, and soon the three of them were right below the massive hole in time. Children! Granny cried as she held on for dear life to the side of the building. But she was too far away to be of any help, as were Mr. Candace and Uncle Jake, and slowly Puck began to drift into the blackness. His face and upper torso was soon gone, then his waist, and finally his knees. All that was left in this world of the boy fairy was his sneakers, which Sabrina clung to with all her strength. I'm losing him, she cried in desperation. Puck, you have to fight it. Without warning, the hole quadrupled in size, threatening to swallow the entire building. From inside it, something unexpected appeared. An enormous house sitting on top of two grotesque chicken legs. The house pushed the children back through the hole and blocked most of the suction, pulling everything toward the time tail. But it wasn't Baba Yaga inside. Sabrina could see her older self hovering in the window. When the house cleared the horizon of the hole, it planted itself on top of the radio station's roof. The door flew open, and the older Sabrina, Daphne, and Puck ran out. The older Granny Ryder wheeled herself out behind them. Dear me, Granny said, as she studied the strange visitors. You've got to close this hole, the older Daphne shouted as she raced to her younger self. Sabrina studied her. There was something different. She still wore Uncle Jake's coat, but the scar that had once marred her beautiful face was gone. How? Daphne asked. Destroy the machine, the older Granny Ryder shouted over the raging storm. Sabrina raced over to Malcolm, Alexander, and Bradford. They had lost control of the wand, which was floating on its own and still showering the vial of water and the ark with its power. Sabrina tried to grab it, but there was a shock and her hand felt like it was on fire. Don't touch it, child, Tom shouted. If you destroy it, you reverse the process. Daphne reached for the vial of water with similar results. She cried out, which caused Cindy to look back at the girls. When she saw the pain in Daphne's face, it seemed to open her eyes to the rest of the chaos. Without a word, she picked up the wonder clock, lifted it over her head, and brought it down hard on the ground. It splintered into thousands of pieces. The wand suddenly stopped firing, and the wind disappeared. Tom fell from the surface of the hole as he began to shrink. Cindy, why? He cried, though his voice sounded weak and tired. I don't need to be young, she said as she stepped over to him and caressed his face. Sabrina could see he was returning to his normal age. His strong arms and legs had returned to feebleness, and his back stooped. I did this so we could be together. Cinderella looked into his eyes. Then so be it, she whispered, and her body began to age as well. Her long blonde hair turned white. Wrinkles waved across her perfect face, and her delicate hands became gnarled. Cindy, no, Tom cried. You can't go back. If you age, you won't ever be young again. What would life be without you, my prince? Cindy said, her voice rough and crackling. When we say our goodbyes, I want to be by your side. Sabrina's attention turned to the future Puck, who stepped up to the younger one. Hello, Trickster King, he said. Puck gaped at his older self. Try to be nicer to Sabrina, the grown-up Puck said with a chuckle. She's going to be important to you in the future, and trust me, she'll never forgive you for gluing her head to that basketball. Puck grinned. I never glued her head to a basketball. You're giving him ideas. That seems to be the end of this video. I'll send you later.